Hey everyone, welcome back to Upside Down Data. So in this video, I want to talk about Solana. And the reason that I want to talk about Solana is because sentiment is in the absolute dumps right now. People are feeling very, very negative about Solana. What I have up here is the Fear and Greed Index for Solana. This is cfgi.io. You can sign up for a free account here and get access to their indicators for a bunch of different assets. And specifically, what I want to focus on is social sentiment. So I'm going to click here on their social indicator. And what this quantifies is how positive or negative sentiment is based on social media posts. I think this is the most direct way to tap into people's actual mood and their evaluations of Solana right now, because it goes directly from what people are saying into this indicator. And so this is one component of their broader fear and greed index, but it's the one that tells us how people are feeling about Solana right now, and that's extraordinarily negative. Now I'm going to go over the price chart here, and it's really no surprise that people are feeling pretty negative about Solana. If you've been around for at least a few weeks, you're familiar with what happened here. 4 weeks ago on the price chart, Solana put in a very unhealthy 60% move to the downside. Most of that was within, just less than 2 days, in fact. And of course, this was caused by the FTX collapse, that debacle, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. This is why sentiment is so negative about Solana. People are, reeling from this price action and worried about what's going to come next. And so the question that I want to ask is whether the market is valuing Solana accurately here. Because if it's not, then that would suggest that there's a potential opportunity to buy low on an asset that's being irrationally undervalued. We know that markets are irrational frequently, and that can occur both to the upside and to the downside. And so the question is that the case here for Solana, and is there an opportunity? I'm going to make the argument that there is an opportunity here. And to do that, I'm going to explain where I think this irrationality is coming from, and I'm going to try to debunk three myths about Solana that I think are contributing to the terrible sentiment about it, but that, in my opinion, don't actually make that much sense. One disclaimer here to be clear: the idea that there's an opportunity here, that doesn't mean that it's risk free. Of course, there's a risk involved. I want to be super explicit about that. And that when I say there's an opportunity, I'm talking about, gradually allocating a small percentage of your portfolio to it, of my portfolio, because I'm describing how I'm thinking about this. This is not financial advice. This is sharing my opinion, and being transparent about that. This is informing my own investment decisions in my portfolio right now. So I'm thinking in terms of dollar cost averaging and a small allocation here. Given that, is there a potential opportunity here with Solana? And as I said, I think that there potentially is. Um, the idea that Solana is dead, which has been a theme on crypto social media over the past month, that you hear a lot, and that people are very concerned about. That comes from at least three sources. One of those is recency bias. It's the hardest hit altcoin over the last month, at least among the top coins, and so that's very fresh in people's minds. Number two is the association with the FTX exchange. You've probably heard about how that went down. As I mentioned, the FTX exchange is dead. So that's the second place where the idea that Solana is also dead comes from. And the third is um, people are applying the case of Luna, which went down earlier this year in May, to Solana, even though, as I'll explain, the situations are fundamentally different. So these are three sources, I think, where the idea that Solana is dead are coming from, and I think they're wrong. Let's take them one by one. So we've already looked at this dump on the price chart here, and the simple fact is that um, we tend to show a recency bias. That means that we evaluate recent performance um, as more important than less recent performance. We overweight recent performance relative to less recent performance when we are evaluating an asset overall. This is natural. We all do it, but it's important to be aware of, because it can make us make worse decisions. Here's the thing that you have to keep in mind: even at its, you know, lower price level now, Solana is still up a pretty impressive amount since this first accumulation region back in the middle of 2020. So we can look here at a pretty nice 2,700%. even after this massive decline from Solana's top, back in, a little over a year ago, 13 months ago now. So Solana has actually outperformed most of its competitors over a similar time period in terms of price, and that includes Cardano, Avalanche, Atom, Polkadot, and many others. So again, the recency bias here risks making us overlook that fact. If you imagine that you just got here today, let's say, and you saw the price without knowing what happened 4 weeks ago that Solana dumped 60% in 2 days, you'd probably think it's actually holding up reasonably well in the grand scheme of things. And I'm arguing that that's actually a more correct perspective. So keep that in mind. Recency bias makes Solana seem like much more of a disaster than it really is. So that's myth number one. The second thing that worries people about Solana that I want to address is its association with FTX. As you probably know, FTX was, until incredibly recently, it's just amazing how quickly this all went down. Um, it was one of the world's biggest crypto exchanges. They had a meltdown a few weeks ago, and that happened because investors lost confidence in the platform's FTT token specifically, and that caused a run. People were trying to withdraw their assets, and the problem that caused the absolute collapse of FTX was that FTX couldn't return customer funds because they had actually taken them, they had transferred them to Alameda Research, which is another institution run by the same people. It's a hedge fund, and they use it to trade with. We've discussed the FTX situation in some earlier videos. You can check that out if you're interested. My point now isn't to focus on FTX and that whole situation, except as it relates to Solana. So the reason that this was a problem for Solana is that Alameda Research, again, that's that hedge fund, which was run by the same people as FTX, they hold about 9% of the overall supply. And that's more than 13% of the circulating supply of Solana. That's obviously a huge amount. That's worth about 640 million at today's prices. So obviously it was worth a lot more than that before the debacle of the FTX meltdown. So as that was happening, Alameda Research moved to sell a bunch of this Solana because they needed to raise funds to try to stay solvent. And this obviously put sell pressure on Solana, and it also panicked the market. And so a lot of other people sold as well. It seems like the biggest lasting impact so far on Solana is for Solana's DeFi ecosystem. The decentralized finance ecosystem on Solana has basically collapsed. This article that I have pulled up here is from shortly after the debacle, but it really hasn't recovered too much. I mean, if we come over here to DeFi Llama, we're looking at the total value locked here on different blockchains across their different protocols and dApps. And what we can see is that Solana is really not near the top of the pack. It used to be, but it declined a lot, and now it's sitting there in 10th place behind some less prominent names, including Kronos, Optimism. Phantom is maybe in a slightly different category, but leaving all that aside, Solana has declined a lot, and it's no longer a behemoth in the DeFi space as it once was. So total value locked in DeFi is actually an important indicator, especially for Solana. It's always useful, but it's especially going to be informative in this case because it's going to give you a sense of whether people start to regain confidence in Solana and begin to entrust the Solana blockchain with their funds. If that number starts to rebound, that will be an important indicator that people are coming back. Not only that people are coming back, but people are putting their skin in the game when it comes to Solana. Now, despite the DeFi situation, and I think that's where Solana has been hardest hit. If you look more closely at the actual connection between FTX and Solana, it doesn't seem like as big a concern than it seemed like it might be at first, and then it seems like people are treating it as. I think people are exaggerating the concern about the connection between FTX and Solana, and the reason for that is because the way this has played out is that FTX filed for bankruptcy, and as a result, their remaining assets have been taken over by the authorities. So it's now in the possession of a liquidator, all of the Solana that belonged to FTX or Alameda. And so the authorities are going to liquidate them. They're going to try to pay people back some of the money that FTX owes. FTX owes a lot of money to a lot of people. But the important point is that that's usually a really slow process. It can take years. It can even take a decade, from what I've read about these types of bankruptcy proceedings, especially when we're talking about a very, very large and a very, very consequential bankruptcy. And so, if and when that time comes, when that's complete, then depending on where those Sol coins end up, there might be a reason to worry about sell pressure in that case. But that's a long way off, is the point. So those are the first two myths I wanted to debunk. First, the idea that Solana's recent dump erases its overall good performance. It doesn't. Solana's lifetime performance and its performance over the last 2-year period um, is still extremely impressive and compares favorably with other of the most impressive coins in the space. The second was that the ties between Solana and FTX place it at continued risk, and that's not the case, at least not in the near future, because the Sol tokens that belonged to Alameda Research are being held by the authorities. They're locked up. They're not going on the open market, and they're not going to cause a price crash anytime soon. The third thing is that Solana is Luna 2.0, or I guess since there is actually a Luna 2.0, I don't know. I guess that would make Solana Luna 3.0. In any case, the third myth here, and I think that is concerning people, is that maybe Solana is going to do what Luna did. People are overgeneralizing, I think, from the Luna collapse that happened back in May. This is a timeline on CoinDesk. If you want the whole story, at least in bullet point form, you could pull this up. And I've got May here, which is when the collapse actually happened. I think this comparison superficially seems to make some sense. Both Solana and Luna were top layer one blockchains as of earlier this year. You would often see them on lists of the top 3 or 5 chains. Um, both had gone on unbelievable runs over similar spans of time. They both multiplied by hundreds of times, and they made some people really rich. And then all of a sudden, Luna lost 99% of its value in less than 2 days. That was wild. And I think people look at Solana and they think, if it can happen to Luna, it can happen to Sol. What's the difference? Um, and the answer is that the situations are actually really different. The main difference, and I think there are other important differences, but the main critical difference is that the complete collapse of Luna happened because of inherent flaws that were anticipated by some people in the space who deserve credit for that, but they were inherent flaws in the design of the blockchain and in the tokenomics specifically. So this was a predictable outcome for Luna, and it was kind of baked in to what they were trying to do. At least in retrospect, we can say that with a lot of confidence. That's not the case for Solana. The decline of Sol and the reason that it lost 60%, and even more than that, in terms of intraday trading, is because um, it was, a separate entity that's Alameda Research is holding or was holding an extremely large Solana position, and it completely collapsed, and that dragged down Solana. So neither situation is good, but they don't compare. So the problem with Luna was the fact that UST, which was its stable coin, it was unsustainable. It lost its $1 peg. That caused people to leave the blockchain and liquidate their positions, and you had this cascade, and the whole edifice came crumbling down all at once. That is not the case for Solana. That's not what happened. That's not what's been happening. It doesn't have the same vulnerability. It does. It's still showing signs of this, um, unfortunate event. The total value locked, as I showed you guys, has declined a lot. But at the same time, there are a lot of really positive signs for the Solana blockchain from a fundamental standpoint and from a developmental standpoint in terms of building a foundation for the future. There's a ton of activity on the network. So Solana, even after all this has went down, even after it lost so much of its market cap, still it processes the second most daily transaction volumes after Ethereum. It has the third highest number of daily active addresses after Ethereum and Polygon. Until recently, it was number 2. It has the second most developers working on the chain after Ethereum. It has tons of dApps, and that number is growing all the time. More than 1,100 dApps on Solana. So there are actually things that you can go and do on the Solana blockchain. It's an active chain, people use it, and people are developing on it for the future. And that's obviously a fundamental difference now between Solana and Luna, especially in the immediate aftermath of what went down. The Luna people are trying to rebuild in some form, but Solana is not in a state of rubble like Luna was then. And Solana doesn't have a stable coin like UST that is making it vulnerable to this kind of collapse, putting it at that constant risk. So that's the third myth. Solana is not comparable to Luna. And for all these reasons, I think people are a little bit too negative on Solana. Um, does that make Solana a good investment? Uh, it might. I'm pulling up here the UDPI. This is the upside downside potential indicator for Solana here on the bottom, as well as for some of these other assets. If you're curious, and the short, medium, and long term timeframes here are different speeds, and the long term UDPI is just coming off of its lowest -5 level, which means that this recent dump took Solana down to unprecedented lows in terms of its price dynamics. Um, but it's starting to creep up off of that level, especially on the shorter term timeframes. It's starting to recover a little bit as it regains kind of some normalcy in terms of volatility after the abnormal move. Um, if Solana has a future, then clearly from the perspective of the UDPI, this is an opportune place to add some to your portfolio. Um, that's conditional on Solana recovering. And so, what I think is the key question for Solana is how the narrative evolves after this cataclysm. Solana definitely has the potential to succeed. All the development happening on it, and all the use of it is building the foundation for that to happen. Um, but there's no getting around the fact that its reputation has taken a hit with the whole FTX thing, and its DeFi presence has especially suffered. So people need to want to come back to Solana. And that's the part that's impossible to predict. I think if people do come back to Solana, Solana will be able to run with that and handle that and grow with its user base. But will people want to come back to Solana? And will people put their skin in the game when it comes to DeFi and other really important elements of building out that ecosystem? What seems to me to be the case is that there is a divergence between how people are looking at Solana and how people are talking about it on social media, as if it's in this danger zone on the verge of collapse, and what's actually going on with Solana, which is that its price is way down, but it's still the same chain, and it actually hasn't changed that much in terms of its operation, over the past month. So some food for thought. Don't count Solana out completely just yet, but be cautious with Solana, of course. There is the potential for more volatility across the market, and given how skittish people are with Solana as well. So, hope you guys found this useful. Thanks for watching.